My first team leader taught me one thing: don't be afraid to make mistakes. He wanted to kill me for doing the same mistake more than once. That's a different story. But don't be afraid. I remember a question came from the previous governor of Maryland. How do I have more startups here in the region? And it's a matter of, how many startups do you have in Israel? It's roughly the same size. How? Because people are not afraid to make mistakes. Because people are not shy to make mistakes. Because the culture actually teaches you to make mistakes. But on the other end, if you are afraid of going to the wrong direction, you are not in the right space.
Yossi, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, let's start from the top. Let's get at this. Tell me about Sepio.
Well, Sepio was founded in 2016. In our market, many companies are becoming part of a bigger or dying way before of that. So it's a long journey of bringing a new approach to a long-lasting problems of managing the risk of connected devices. When I say that to experts, sometimes they will jump, IoT security or OT security or something like that. No, it's broader than that. Any piece of hardware that has any sort of connectivity into the organization is within the scope or the broader scope of what Sepio is doing. So we help organizations eventually to manage the risk of connected devices and that what applies as a risk on their organization. So it's a monitoring on one end, but a control or security on the other end.
And what makes this different than a lot of the solutions that you see out there right now?
Yeah, so technology-wise first, we are looking on the problem from a different angle. So many of the solutions in the industry are focused mostly about analyzing the activity of device and not the existence of the device. I would say all of the solutions other than Sepio. Due to the fact that we are actually a different technology, software, all the solutions are eventually software-based, but looking into the existence layer, into the physical layer, allow us to coming and saying, hey, you have that device, maybe it's active, maybe it's not active, maybe it's a good device, maybe it's a risky device or even a bad device. But generally speaking, triggering the discussion inside the customer organization within the fact that there is something there, not that thing is doing or not doing. It allows us to literally discover more devices and analyze risk in aspects that are totally not covered today. So from the basic question of what do I have, where it is, what's the impact on my organization, to more advanced question of do I have implants or rogue device or hidden, spoofed, supply chain manipulated devices inside my organization.
And what led you to go down this path? Like a lot of people obviously went a different angle and different path on this. And I know you've been, this isn't your first company that you started. What led you down the path to take this angle?
And not the second. We are a group of people that work together, at least the founders of the company, we are working together for more than 30 years. And we started our career in the Israeli intelligence, in the Israeli NSA, if I may call it like that, in the early 90s, while, the entire world changed and more connected devices. We didn't call it like that. And of course, IoT was not the term to be used. TCP/IP was not the term to be used. Of course, not cyber. But eventually, it's the same story of if an attacker is hiding something in plain sight, in many cases, you won't be able to detect it unless it is doing something. But it's kind of bringing us back to antiviruses in the 90s that were trying to figure out if eventually a signature of a virus is being found in your infrastructure. But if the signature changed a bit, you couldn't find anything. And the evolution on the protection of software assets in the organization didn't come into the protection of hardware or against hardware risk in many organizations, mostly because of lack of technology to allow to do that. So we researched for several years after we started Sepio, and we said, potentially, if we'll find a software tool that can easily be deployed and easily being adopted by organization, we'll be able to answer all of these questions, from the basic question to the most mature question of these highly sophisticated cyber organizations in the big banks, in government agencies, and all of that. And I think what led us to that eventually was understanding the risk from both sides of the ocean, from the bad actor or whatever, the attacker, and not only on the defender side. And looking on that as hardware engineers and not like software engineers helped a lot in this approach.
That's interesting. What would you say has been probably the hardest technology leap for you guys? Or what was the hardest thing to build or solve within the product?
There were two parts to that, actually, to be honest. One part was an ability to do it in a repetitive way, because eventually what we collect is analog information. And analog comes with influence or influenced by noise, electrical noise, by temperature, by manufacturing, by so many noisy parameters that eventually creates an ability or to noisy, or actually generates noise above any acceptable threshold. So one thing was to be able to clean the noise. The second one was like, okay, so we created a new data source, and it's clean and it's good, but it has nothing to do with the other data sources. So we need to align that into information that eventually will lead to an actionable data. And by creating a lot of data, and literally we created 3 labs that are generating a lot of information for us in a statistic or in a synthetic way, but also taking significant amount of the data by allowing our customers to anonymously and of course non-privileged way in any aspect to contribute data, generated an ability to create a huge ocean of data from the type we need. So it's not just securing the organizations, it's actually helping them to helping the entire community by using more and more data points. So we are getting close to, we were 500 million of data points a couple of months ago. I guess we'll be around 1 billion data points within several months. I think we are halfway there. It helps us to be very accurate and give a lot of color on the findings, which makes it actionable and not just, hey, we found something, we don't know what it is.
That's crazy. That's a lot of data. That is a lot of data. What was kind of your entry point or your kind of go to market? Like what companies, and it sounds like government agencies as well, what's kind of your focus right now, and how did you kind of work your way into the market?
Everyone like to talk about success, but from success you don't learn a lot. So let's talk about mistakes for a second.
Okay.
When we started, our belief was that organizations have enough monitoring tools. So they really don't need us. That was our belief. They really don't need us to bring another monitoring tool that will help them to figure out what hardware do they have. Mm-hmm. And we came and said, you know what? We'll give you the best tool in the world, and it is the best tool in the world to detect rogue devices. And the reaction in the market was like really interesting, but A, I don't have budget for that. Second, why do you think I have so much visibility tools? I don't. And the third one was like, if you can replace a solution that I don't like with a solution that, based on what you say and you have your own reputation, we are opening the door for you. But if you can do it quicker and with less resources, without hardware sensors, without tapping into my traffic, which is a nightmare in any aspect, from legal to compliance to third-party risk and all of that, we are open to talk also about that. And we came back to the drawing board. And now, in a romantic way, I can say we just removed a if then, if it's not rogue-eyed, it was not as easy as that. But
Right.
generally speaking, in essence, it's exactly the pushback and feedback we got from the industry. So you fail and you come out quick, hopefully quick enough, and we did, with a better solution that is broader. And then the reaction in the market is like amazing. And then analysts like Gartner start to give you really good ranks for time to value, to accuracy. We see more devices. It takes literally a fraction of the time and fraction of the indirect cost. We're not cheaper than any other solution, but when you look on the total cost of ownership, when you look on days or hours comparing to months or even couple of years to deploy, when you think about you don't need any third party tool to help us to become better, that's a dramatic difference between us and the market.
Right. Right.
And that's where we are.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Now, this isn't your first cybersecurity company. What? How many have you done, and what keeps you in this game? Why do you keep doing this?
So officially, we did two more. Non-officially, we are trying to help other, especially younger, to focus. Every week, I'm trying to put, mostly during weekends, but more time to help other in focusing their belief. Just on this Sunday, I had an amazing session with amazing group of really, really smart people in totally different aspect of cybersecurity. But I believe that the only thing that keeps us happy and engaged is solving a real problem. And sometimes people that work for me don't like the fact that we are running like crazy because you have really good and really large customers, because you
Right.
really solve a big problem.
Yep.
So it's not like, you go to work in a startup, and some amazing companies eventually, but some of them are writing code we call it to the drawer, like, love letters to the drawer, until someone is able to figure out what you're talking about, or someone is interested enough to take a try. No, we don't have that benefit, and of course disability at the same time. No, we develop something that will be used within days by the biggest names in the industry. So it's a lot of responsibility, and it's a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of sometimes tension between the ones that are sitting in front of a customer that to compare to the back end organization that are eventually doing the most important thing, which is delivering the product.
Right.
But I'm doing it enough years to know how to, or at least to be aware to the balance between these two. There's no yes or no or right or wrong. You play with these on a daily basis. But I think that let's stop here. I think this is a good answer to your question. No, I don't want to be too specific.
Well, you can go any direction you want here. You can go any direction you want. Now, one of the things, you have, I think it's incredible. Like, some of the people that you worked with, like you said, you've worked with for over 30 years. What keeps that group together? Like, what is it that works well with you guys that are been doing this for so long together?
We hate each other so much that we are not willing anyone to enjoy the fact that he's not working with the other anymore. So, but being serious for a second, we are totally different. Totally different. There is,
like, in what ways?
The way we look on the world, the way we look on the market, the way we look on communication, the way we look on strategy in some cases. But what makes us really good is that we know eventually where to push and where to push back and where to give up. So I'm the CEO, and one is the COO, and one is the CMO, and one is VP for strategic and all of that. But eventually it's a group. So not always the investors, don't tell them, like to know that we are a bit of democracy. But that's good as, no one, eventually sometimes I need to take the decisions, and not always it's easy decisions to take. But eventually using people that for so many years, and you really know every one of us on the other two, what makes us really good and where we are better or worse than the other two, gives the ability to really, really find the best solution. Are we free of mistakes? Absolutely not. But
Right.
we know and we are resilient. So, many people, I think too many startups are eventually not going to the right direction because people are getting tired, because it's too hard. The roller coaster bring you low sometimes. There are days that are you really, really, really don't want to get out of the bed.
Yeah.
And there are days that you really can't wait for morning to start in order to start the day. So it's almost like, ups and downs that require some medical attention in many aspects. But being serious for a second, being resilient, and a team is way more resilient than one person, regardless who's the person, uh, shows twice and hopefully three times soon that the investment makes a lot of sense in team
Yeah.
like that.
Well, I think there's definitely you have to have this balance of like collaboration, but also know that there is some sort of hierarchy. Like you said, there's times when you just, as the CEO, you need to make the decision, and we can't sit without a decision. But I think what I've seen, the best teams are a good diverse group of people that have different ideas, different thoughts, different perspectives that work well together, that can actually communicate that and, you know, argue over things, but in a positive, creating that positive friction to kind of move
I'll
forward.
say that in a very easy way. We can argue for 8 hours in a conference room and then go to eat lunch together or dinner together, and there is no hard feelings. People in the sit in the room and think they are going to kill each other because as good Israelis, talking in high volume is coming with the DNA. But on the other end, we know where not to bring emotions, even though in the argument sometimes there is a lot of emotion. But eventually, it's not about ego; it's about the best result.
Right.
And sometimes it takes a lot of time for people to get used to that. It was never a challenge for us. It was never a challenge since the beginning. And I think part of that is, we can give a lot of romance to the clearance and filter processes of organizations like where we started our career and all of that. And maybe there is a part of that, but eventually it's not one team that is different than many other teams that are working together for many years that came from the same place. So maybe there is a bit of that in kind of the grouping of right people. And by the way, we didn't start in the same team. We kind of maneuvered in building a team that kind of included us. So in many aspects, I think that sometimes, as they say, in many aspects of relationship between people, opposites are working way better than similar, like-minded people, and I think this is a great example for that. To be
Yeah.
honest.
I think that's so important. And, getting back to like sometimes when there is tension and there are arguments, I think that's something that you need to have. Like teams need to discuss things and they need to get into things. I would rather, and I work with teams all the time. I'm in the conference room all the time with teams. It's harder for me to be with a team that doesn't want to speak its mind, because a team that's not talking about what's not working or not sharing what their opinion is, that's a lot more dangerous than a team that's on the other
Absolutely,
side of
because
that.
tension is not disappearing. They just don't vent it out and speak it out. I totally agree with that. But I'll tell you something which is, one of the things that we are working really out, and it's not like we have a best solution for that, is sometimes when we are three in the room or four in the room, when Greg is joining, and he's more American, so he's more culture, and letting people to finish their sentences, which we are not great in, but we suck the room, we suck the air from the room. So, and we are aware of that. So we are working really hard to let other people because there is a very strong management team in Sepio.
Yeah.
We are great in finding the right people. I think we are A+ in finding the right people from product, from engineering, from sales, from marketing is fancy, but from other aspects, finance and all of that, But getting into the room with three of us sometime require a lot of attention from our side at the beginning, not to suck the entire room. And we're doing mistakes there. Don't take me wrong. I'm not saying we are the best in doing, but we are aware of that. We are becoming better. And hopefully in 20 years, we'll be the best in that. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy. And I've spent a lot of time with teams. And one of my most popular things I'll say is when I'm looking at a team, I'll say, like, hey, Tim, it looks like you want to say something. You know what I mean? When the other people are kind of going at it, and I kind of reading the room and kind of like recognizing, some people are not speaking. Is it because they don't have anything to say, or do they look like they want to say something? Or they just, culturally, we are all different, right? And that's a good thing. But sometimes, you want to kind of recognize that and let them speak. Or
totally.
The other thing I do a lot is it might be like, Yossi, you said 7, and Ryan, you said 2. Why 2? Why 7? And let's like work this out.
Create that dialogue, yeah.
Yeah, and when you create that dialogue, a lot of times, almost most of the time, they're on the same page. They were just saying different words, or they're on the same page, but one was thinking it's 3 years out versus this year, and that's where the confusion was. And so trying to create that conversation, and I think with a diverse team is the best thing.
It's critically important, and that dynamic in a team, can break a company or make it great. So everyone says it's all about the product. Yes, it's all about the product, but that's just for the basic, because the rest is way more important than the product. The product is giving you the ability to sit on something or to stand on a floor, but no one buys the floor. And if the team is not tuned, if messages are not clear and not aligned, that's a big problem.
Now, I'd love your opinion on this. And my belief is a team needs to be very focused, but you also need to be flexible. And it's really kind of finding that right space of focus, but being able to adapt and iterate and change as you go along. Have you guys pivoted and changed?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it also goes to eventually a trust between the members in the team, because I trust you, which means that if you're saying something different than me, but I really trust you and I'm not sure I'm the right one, it opens the dialogue. So yes, and pivoting is, many startups pivots in the big thing. It requires a lot of courage to do that, but sometimes it's the easiest thing. To pivot on the small details, to pivot on things that everyone feel that they're ironed and they know 100% of that, that's harder as the team, not always in the big picture, but in the small picture that eventually breaks or makes, that's a big issue. And I have example, it's to sell, what to focus on, what is the story, because I have a product, it's a platform, now I need to sell it. How? What's the story I'm telling the market? Well, I have marketing, why not listening to him? Because engineering think they also has an opinion, and they're entitled to have an opinion. And I have an opinion, and finance has an opinion. Our CFO is a very experienced guy. And eventually we have a lot of opinions. But eventually, maybe the initial story is not right, and the marketing should listen. Maybe they are right, and everyone else is making a mistake, or it's too early. That's another story. How do you make that decision? No, listen to me. I'm the CEO. I know everything. This is what we do.
Yep.
That's not a CEO. That's a bullshit. But doing what you said of what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Why? Let's go. Let's do some A/B testing. Not always you have the budget. Not always you have the time to do that. But you cannot say, I know everything about everything and this is the only way to do it. My way or no way. No, that's not a team. That's a one-man show. Yeah. Regardless who's the one-man show, I would guess more than 50% of the cases will break a team, will break a company.
Yeah, I think it might be more than that, right? Like I really think
I try to be subtle.
Yeah. No, I think it's so important because, I mean, the reality, people want to be empowered and they want to run, they want to be successful, and if they're just told what to do, that's not the type of people that thrive in early stage and growth stage companies. Like, I think the people that thrive are constantly learning, open to change, trying to understand everything,
Ask questions.
and ask questions, right? And ask a lot of questions.
Some of these questions are literally annoying, and sometimes, seriously, why do you say that? Why do you think that? What? And sometimes you really don't have the time, the strength, the energy to start answering every, let's call it stupid question, just to make
Right.
it interesting and tension. But it's not stupid question, and sometimes this question worth maybe a lot of man hours or man months or man years.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're worth a lot of millions. Maybe on the top line or in the bottom line, there is plenty of questions. And yeah, everyone make mistakes. But the question, I had my first team leader that I was actually texting with him a couple of hours ago, taught me one thing, which is don't be afraid to make mistake. He wanted to kill me for doing the same mistake more than once. That's a different story. But being serious and of course don't do all the mistakes possibly, but don't be afraid. And I think one of the I remember a question came from the previous governor of Maryland. How do I have more startups here in the region? And it's a matter of, how many startups do you have in Israel? It's roughly the same size. How? Because people are not afraid to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are not shy to make mistakes. Because the culture actually teaches you to make mistakes.
Right.
Again, some mistakes, we've seen what happens in events like October 7. But on the other end, if you are afraid of going to the wrong direction, you are not in the right space.
Right. You're going to freeze
Because it's
too.
a lot of trial and error.
Yeah. It's a lot of trial and error. I think from day one, it's trial and error, right? I think it's kind of that scientific process of trying to figure it out. From day one, you're trying to figure something out. Then you add other team members. They're all trying to figure it out. And as long as you can have that communication as you become like a team of teams, I really think that you're constantly learning. And once you get to the point, if you actually think you know everything, someone's going to come by and wipe you out.
If you think you know everything, first, you're right. And the second, it's a good time to retire. No, seriously, like you lost curiosity, you lost the appetite to learn more. You know everything about everything.
Right.
I keep saying to the most dangerous, especially in security, the most dangerous person in organization is the one that feels he did everything he can in order to be 100% security. There's no 100% security. If you feel like that, take a time off.
Yeah. Yeah. I often reflect on not unless you know everything, do you know anything? Like it's one thing could totally wipe out your belief system, right? Like I think one thing could change everything. And you don't know everything, so you got to keep on going.
It's not fun to know everything. No, seriously.
After doing this for decades, looking at your career, did you ever think that this is what you'd be doing? Like looking back and being where you're at now, is this where you thought you'd be?
It's funny because I grew up in a family where my father was a technical guy. He worked for the Israeli Air Force for many, many years. And I forgot about that, but I was looking on old albums and I saw me building labs of, today I call it bullshit, but at that time it was super fancy labs as a young guy. So I knew that I want to be in technology. Did I know that in 91, when I joined the intelligence, that I'll sit in front of you 34 years later and talk about that as it's still my first day and I enjoy every second of that? I can say yes, but it's bullshit. What I can say is that it's not the same, and you learn so many things and you do it in a different way. And I would die to write some code. I'm not allowed to do any coding in Sepio, and thanks God for our customers for that. And I would die to sit in, and sometimes I am sitting in the room trying to be a fly on the wall. Unfortunately, I can't help myself, and I'm being vocal sometimes too much about my opinions, and your generation is different than my generation. I heard that when I was young, so it's bullshit. But what I did know is that I enjoy learning. I enjoy innovating. I enjoy pivoting. So as long as you enjoy that, is it really important if you do that or that or that? As long as you do that, no. As long as you solve problems, as long as you bring value, I think there is a lot of interest in our community, especially in the Israeli community around here, but not just for a good hummus place. So is it what I'm going to do? Many people hope yes, and I hope I'll do that sometime in the future. But it
Yeah.
will be in the same approach of let's be innovative, let's bring value, let's solve problems that are, and we can spend hours on what is not solvable in hummus today. But regardless, the answer is the same answer. Who cares what you do as long as you bring value and you have some return on the time to, at least for the society.
Right. Right. When you're at the early stage as a CEO founder, you're kind of doing everything. And then you eventually start to get to bring people in and then you build your leadership team. What's your sweet spot? Like what is the type of work that you love doing?
To be honest, all across, it's different. As you said, that the early days, you pick the phone and you start calling,
Right.
and you are the one that order pizza because someone is staying at night, and you are the one that calls the hotels and all. By the way, I'm still booking my own hotels and I'm booking my flights, even though people are getting nervous about that. But it is what it is. Everyone has his own disabilities.
Yeah.
But totally different problems. Hiring at the beginning is a challenge. Getting into attention, after 2 times, it's much easier to raise money at the beginning.
Right.
It's not easier later on because the expectation from you are higher. So it's not always easy to do it afterwards. And you see that today, many, which I didn't, but many are raising a lot of money at the beginning if you had enough success. So they won't need to do it later on for a very long time. We hadn't doing that, and it was a challenge afterwards, but it is what it is. But then, managing managers is tricky sometimes. Keeping everyone's value and ego and opinions in the right context and keeping the organization flat in terms of giving everyone the opportunity to influence, not as a favor, but this is why you pay these people money, this is why you want them, and you work really hard sometimes to keep them in your organization. Employee retention is a challenge. It wasn't as bad in the past. And again, there is some generational thing. I think COVID changed a lot of things in the way people are looking on their careers. Work from home is a challenge for good and bad. I'm not expressing any specific opinion, but we see that many organizations are still struggling with the right balance. I don't have the right answer to that. I know that we are struggling with the right balance. I think that in any step, tomorrow I have a board meeting. Is that the best adventure in my life? I like to work with my board. I really appreciate their time. I really appreciate what they are doing for us and with us. But a board meeting in many aspects is not the best usage of time. I want to sell. I want to go to customers. I want to talk to customers. I want to talk to the market, to analysts, to you, to create awareness. But this is they'll kill me if I'll say necessary evil, because it's not evil, but it is a necessary tax for running a company. So, different levels, different aspects, different good and bad things that you need to do.
What's your favorite thing to do all day long? Is that to be in front of the customers?
In front of the market. It's not just customers. In front of smart people that give you value when they give you the feedback. Because it helps you to create a better product. It creates more use cases to problems you solve, but you didn't know you are solving also that. And there's plenty of examples for that. And just sharing ideas, it's more important. Many of these are customers, and we have smart customers, really, really smart customers, and we are blessed with that.
One last question, but before I do that last question, let me throw in one other question for you. What has been the hardest thing in growing this company for you?
In 2020, 21, 22, we grew like crazy. Then 23 happened, and 23 was tricky year. And when I'm talking to people there, yeah, it was tricky for the industry. Yes, but I'm running Sepio. I'm not running the industry. and 23 was very tricky, especially when you work on these big projects with really big enterprises. That kind of new initiatives are not easy in times like 23. And with government with no budget, and we have customers in the government and all of that. And realizing that the market is getting into kind of unknown for a while, and unknown is for how long also. And you need to start planning in a totally blackness. You have no clue for how long the impact. And analysts can say whatever they want, but who knows the future. And then you start getting calls from investors. Hey, we do that, we want you to do that, we saw a company doing that and that. And having that small boat in a big ocean, shaking from side to side, you just raised a lot of money. You really want to keep growing, but on the other end, you don't know for how long you need to that money to run. And in parallel, you really don't know how bad will be the market in terms of selling. Eventually, it's not raising money, it's selling to customers. That was a tricky time. And unless you are, I think experiencing that day, that week, in that month was extremely important, because to look in the eyes of a very, very experienced investor and say, I hear you, I really appreciate your opinion, and not being polite, but really listening and really, but saying, but no, you're wrong. You're wrong for what we need to do. It's the wrong path. No, we don't need to do A, B, or C. And by the way, I had calls, no, spend more money, spend less money, cut everything, hire more people. So in any case, you need to say to some, you're wrong, in a nice way, in a polite way, in a discussion based on not facts, but belief. Right. Is a very hard thing to do. And I think that was one of the times that you say, actually, maybe someone else had to be the CEO for today. Not tomorrow, just today.
Right.
So that's the hardest time sometimes, to look on people that you really trust, they gave you a lot of money, and say, no.
Right. That's really hard. And I think for first-time founders, they don't know they can do that, I think, is the case. I think sometimes they don't realize they can do that, and everybody's afraid to do that. Everybody wants to be collaborative and have everybody happy.
I cannot say that I was not afraid to do that. But you know that you have no choice. And I think that's the best idea and best advice I can give to young people. It's your show. And people trust you for running that show. And eventually, you'll have to make the mistakes. They cannot make the mistakes for you.
And from mistakes comes a lot of learning, and it makes you even better, right?
And maybe it's not a mistake.
Exactly. All right. So I've asked you a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to leave it open to you to ask me one question before I give you your final question. Do you have a question for me?
Yes, I do. Okay. You are working with plenty of teams, and in, I would guess, plenty of sectors, plenty of size of organizations and all of that. What's the one thing that is common to all of them? The success ones.
All the successful ones? I think what's common to all of them is that they have restraints. constraints, I should say, right? They have capital constraints, they have talent constraints, they have market constraints, they have all these constraints. And I think the ones that are most successful, one, recognize that, but two, like really reflect on what's worked, what's not worked. And it's a collaborative team and they put a plan together, even though that plan may change, but they put away time to think about like what they should do. They have conversations that go deeper than what should we do? Okay, let's go do that. What should we do and how should we actually do that? And define that. I think a lot of the teams that don't succeed, they just don't go a layer deep enough into that how. They know what they should do, or they're making bets on that, but they don't get into the conversations how they should do it. And I think that's where teams really collaborate. And the best ones define that how. They define who's going to do it, when it's going to get done by, and they have a mechanism to track that and to organize themselves, even if it's lightly, to organize themselves around that to allow them to keep on moving forward. And I think the teams that just say, hey, let's do this, and then they break off and do it, or the CEO just tells people what to do, almost every time those teams don't work. It's just because they run out of not only time and capital, they run out of energy. And those teams just burn out. Those people just burn out. Even in good times, I've seen a lot of teams burn out in good times. And it's because I think it's that how. Yeah. And I think it's that how layer. It's not the what. I think we eventually figure out the what. It's how we actually going to do that. And some may say that's strategy. Some might say that's tactics. And I think it's just a layer of what you're looking at. If it's 3 years out, how we're going to do it is strategy. If it's 90 days out, that how is really the tactics of what we're going to do. And I think a lot of teams just don't go into that layer, and they kind of leave that layer because it can be messy.
It's mostly messy. And, I'll tell you something about that, if I may. One of the things you learn in hierarchy organization like army, the Israeli army is similar to the American in many aspects, but there is a major difference, which is the appreciation to rank is way lower. So it's not important if you're a colonel or a major or a captain or a lieutenant. If you're opening, especially in the intelligence, if you're not open organization, you will fail in your mission. And when you get your first stripe and you look all day long on the stripe, I'm the king of the world, you really don't know how much you don't know. And when you do it at age 20 or 19 or 21, depends what your path is, that's okay. As long as in 23 or in 22 or later or earlier, you're becoming aware to that is just a piece of metal. What makes it valuable is your behavior, is your ability to look on people. You have sometimes the power and the need to make a decision, but unless you listen to them, they'll never follow you. They may go after you because they must, but that's not the same energy. And when you learn that, that makes a team working. So sometimes I need to argue, sometimes I need to take decisions, sometimes people don't like the decision. I learned the term from one of my managers. I don't want to say, apply and disagree. That's okay. But at least he had the chance to convince, and we agreed not to agree. It happens.
But you still got to commit, even if you disagree, right? I think that's so important. Awesome. Well, here's my final question. Thanks so much for your time. It's a scenario. Now, this is a little different than any other question I asked you so far, but here's a scenario. Yossi, you're trapped on an island the rest of your life. You got food, water, everything that you need to survive on this desert island the rest of your life. But one thing you don't have, and that's entertainment. There's no entertainment on the island. But an old 80s boombox drifts ashore with unlimited batteries, but you can only bring one album to listen to the rest of your life. What music album are you going to bring?
I'm going to break you out now. People that know me know that I'm the worst person in the world to talk about music. The only music I listen is actually in Israeli music. And not just Israeli music, but all the Israeli music. The question is not so valid for me, but what I would say is that Israeli music was the best music I know is about the 60s, 70s, 80s in Israel. And it's kind of, in many aspects, some melodies, some rock and roll, but it's totally different than what an American would answer you, I
Okay.
guess.
So what album would you bring? What would it be for you?
I don't know the names of the albums. I know the names of the songs.
Okay.
But Ilan Ramon was the first Israeli astronaut that was killed in the Columbia. And when he woke up one day, he was a colonel in the Israeli Air Force, one of the legendary pilots in the Israeli Air Force. Unfortunately, several years ago, his son was killed in a plane crash when he actually finished his training in the Israeli Air Force as a jet pilot. And when he woke up one day, his wife sent him, to the space a song from a famous, I think it's the 70s, 60s, 70s, mostly 70s, a trio. It's called the Eye Windows trio.
What's it called?
And
The Eye Windows?
yeah,
Okay.
it was in Hebrew, so it's kind of a ad hoc translation, but it's funny and sad that he woke up one day and the entire spacecraft to wake up to that kind of legendary Israeli music. I never like to talk politics on things like that, and I'm not going to do it. But we suffered in October 7, one of the most horrific days, and I was born in '73 when was the first surprise from the Yom Kippur War. And for me, living here in America and in day like October 7 was a very emotional day. So we are working hard in order to bring the awareness to our community or to people around us.
Right.
And for more than a year, and now we're doing it every couple of weeks. We conquered a bridge on top of it's an overpass on one of the busiest roads here. And we come with huge speakers and people with flags, and we mostly put Israeli songs for the community that drives around that. So that song and other it depends on the day. Sometimes it's sad days because we get bad news. Sometimes
Right.
we get better news. But so these songs are no one would ever thought that they would be played on an overpass in Maryland 30, 40, 50 years after these songs were created. So
Yeah. Well, do you have a favorite one of your favorite songs from that?
yeah, are you going to hear my voice?
Are you going to hear my voice?
Again, the translation of.
All right, I'm going to look that one up.
I'll send you the link.
Oh, that'd be great. All right, Yossi, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate your time. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you.